Go ahead.
Thanks, John. All right. Well, since we are starting the recording, let me sort of restart my remarks, guys. So give me a few minutes here to get through it again. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the National Shipper Advisory Committee. Many of the people in the audience may be new to this process, so I'll like to discuss real quickly how the committee works, who they are, and what is going to happen this afternoon. First of all, my name is Dylan Richmond. I work for the Federal Maritime Commission and serve as the designated federal officer for this committee. What this means is that I serve as the liaison between the committee and the agency. I implement the FMC's charge as it relates to the committee and ensure that the committee abides by federal laws as they apply to advisory committees. I also assist with managing these meetings and ensure that the committee sticks to their agenda. The National Shipper Advisory Committee was charged by the United States Congress for advising the FMC on issues impacting the shipping public and the supply chain. They are comprised of members representing importers and exporters from numerous industries and of various size. They raise up issues that they believe should be addressed by the Commission. Committee members are selected by the commissioners, but operate independently. This meeting is being hosted at the Northwest Seaport Alliance's facilities in Tacoma, Washington. The audience should note that today's meeting is independent of the Northwest Seaport Alliance. They are not affiliated with the committee and have not had any input in today's discussions. That being said, I would like to thank the Northwest Seaport Alliance for their generosity and allowing the committee to meet around this week's AgTC meeting. In particular, John Tullis and his team have been very helpful in ensuring all the logistics for a hybrid meeting are good to go. So we are grateful for that. Now on to today's agenda. The committee will initially discuss some of their ongoing work and potential work that may be coming down the pipeline. They operate a number of subcommittees that discuss issues of critical importance to shippers. I'll note that these subcommittees and the topics they discuss are selected by the committee members. Following that, the committee would like to open it up to public comment. I know that the committee is eager to hear perspectives from a broad range of industry stakeholders and are looking forward to hearing comments from the audience today. And I'll note here that we'll take comments from both any of the in-person attendees and the virtual ones. And when we get to that, I'll sort of let you know how we move forward with that. Finally, I have a few housekeeping items. The National Shipper Advisory Committee operates under the auspices of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. So because of that, minutes of this meeting will be taken. This meeting is also being recorded, as noted earlier, and will be posted on the NSAC's website afterwards. For the members who are joining us virtually, if you are not speaking, please mute your microphones. And the only people who should be on camera for most of today's discussions should just be the committee members. And my final points are for the committee before they launch into their discussions. Committee members are reminded that antitrust laws do apply to the members in today's discussions, and committee members are reminded that they cannot speak for the committee, the Federal Maritime Commission, or the federal government in their role as members outside of the committee structure. They may speak to their personal observations as to their committee service and personal opinions on recommendations that the committee adopts. So thank you all for bearing with me. With that said, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that there's a quorum of committee members present, so the meeting can begin.
Thank you. So I'd like to begin with a quick welcome both to the NSAC members that were able to make it in person to this part of the country for this year, as well as everybody joining us virtually, and the guests in the room, as well as who have joined virtually. It's an important opportunity to engage on bigger issues that are affecting us beyond the individual firm and relationship level in the United States. I want to thank the Northwest Seaport Alliance for hosting, along with AgTC for coordinating, because what we've been trying to do since Miami, so Q1 meeting of last year, is really to create opportunity to more engage with the shipping community, to make more people aware of what we're working on. And we found that one of the better ways to do it is co-location with shipper meetings that are already in place. So we had good participation at TPM hosted in Q1, and we're fortunate that Northwest Seaport Alliance was able to host this here. So we had a meeting space, and in coordination with AgTC, which is a big annual meeting for a lot of ag exporters, whether they're importers or exporters. So again, participation and engagement. So the volunteers that make up the committee, again, are both split between importer and exporter, some of the biggest names in the country, as well as many important agricultural or export verticals that exist across the country. We believe we have a good cross-section of representation. And at the same time, it's extremely important to hear from the public that people are comfortable across the range of things, because as we started the initial work, there were key priorities that the members identified, and we have worked those. And at the same time, new things may be coming up in the dynamics that we continue to face as we go through this first term of ours. So we'll continue through the balance of this year with our Q3 meeting similarly in a location that has the opportunity to connect with as many shippers as possible in the country, but virtually. It's extremely important that you're participating as well, and we appreciate you being here today. So I think taking stock of where we're at, right? We are midway through 2024 as far as the work of the committee. We are in the swan song of our first term in terms of what we're doing. And so I think we've made a lot of recommendations, and the subcommittee chairs and vice chairs will talk to that in a minute, so I'm not going to step over what they're going to provide to you. There's been a lot of work done. And if we think about this, it's all sitting inside of either things you're facing as shippers within the system, whether you're importers or exporters, and at the same time aligned with key focuses from specific commissioners within the agency itself, or the commission. And so I think we continue to be, as Dylan said, independent, but we've really seen alignment on the criticality of the things that the subcommittees are focused on. And I appreciate everybody's continuing commitment to put the best quality thinking forward about how to deal with some of these longstanding issues, because they're longstanding issues, exacerbated by what we went through in the pandemic and still existing at probably a higher rate than most people are comfortable with post the pandemic. And so it just shows that there's more to do. And that's not being judgmental to any participant in the system. We're the leading economy in the world, and we have the opportunity to lead on how to improve physical goods movement, the visibility to it, the behaviors in the system, and coordination around that. And so as we finish up in terms of like the path forward, we're going to continue to focus on where we deem to be the priorities in coordination with the commission and the specific work of the commissioners. I do want to let Rich speak. He's standing in for Ken O'Brien as vice chair today. So I'll let him give some finishing comments before he switches roles and starts talking about the fees and surcharges subcommittee.
And just thank you to everybody in the room. It's been a terrific 2.5 years working with everybody. And as we get into our final leg here in our terms expiring in December of this year, we've done a lot of great work, and it's been just a great organization to be part of. So thank you, everybody. Taking some of the out of Dylan's page here about the formation of NSAC. I went back to review our charter and have a look at it. And just briefly, I'll say the objectives, scope of activities and duties of NSAC are to advise, provide information on, and to make recommendations on competitiveness, reliability, integrity, and fairness of the international ocean freight delivery system. That's a pretty big statement of what we are chartered here to do. And I would say that in light of some of the difficulties that we're facing currently, last few weeks or last several months, especially on the Trans-Pacific trade for both inbound and outbound, we're starting to test the boundaries of competitiveness, reliability, and integrity and fairness in how the business is being conducted today. So with that said, there's been some internal discussion about, and we know that the FMC is also under the guidance of Congress through OSTRA to actually come out with a rulemaking. They've had an NPRM and a supplemental NPRM on refusal to deal. And so as a advisory committee to the FMC, we've started a working group now to look at that in some more depth, maybe in light of recent activity. And so we have a working group established that'll be hoping to advise in a less formal way, I think, to the FMC. So that's one of the announcements that we have going forward, is a new direction that we're taking here, sort of final leg of the term. And that's where I would end, Mike, just keeping everybody abreast of the direction.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I will let you pivot into fees and surcharges as the subcommittee chair.
Okay, thank you. Wearing new hat, subcommittee chair, surcharges. And has an easy job. You got off fast. So in our time here at Fees and Surcharges, we've actually delivered 4 recommendations and 1 commentary. This is not new to, we've been reviewing these at our more recent NSAC meetings, but for anybody who's new to listening to this and for the public in the room, we've issued recommendations on jurisdiction over rail storage charges that happen on through bills of lading. With the excess dwell fees that were a West Coast focused fee, but have had some traction in other places. Early receipt date or ERDs, and a 4th recommendation on demurrage and detention on government holds. We also made commentary circling back for a second bite of the apple when the D&D final bill was being considered. Again, looking at the jurisdiction on the rail storage charges. So all of these have been formally put in. All of these have been responded to by the FMC. In many of the cases, the FMC didn't comment because there were ongoing cases or there was something that was being contemplated in some future regulation. The ongoing cases that they cited in some of these cases have been settled. So there's been no precedent setting kind of jurisdiction that's come out of that or recommendations that have come out of that. So we can't rely on those precedents because they're not there. And in the D&D final rule, which was maybe to incorporate some of these recommendations, we've also found that the D&D final rule was silent on some of these things. So unfortunately, without a regulatory fix, the behavior doesn't change. And so we're faced with, the unfair practices that continue that we've highlighted and picked, right from the very beginning, what we thought were some of the best examples. And so that leaves the shipping public, importers and exporters, basically to fight these on a case-by-case basis through the variety of dispute resolution processes. And I think this is somewhat disappointing. So we've put a lot of time and effort into that, but we have not really seen a change in the behavior in the industry on those specific topics. But I will say on a more positive note that I really do applaud the FMC for the regulations that they did put out in this year in 2024, which include the carrier automated tariff final rule and the D&D billing final rule, which I think puts us in the right direction. In many cases, it sets some of the guardrails that we have needed in terms of demurrage and detention. And so it did change some business practices. And we'd like to really figure out how do we get to that same point with these other topics that we've identified that still need to be addressed in terms of either changing the business practice or having a regulatory fix. The Fees and Surcharges Committee in our ongoing work is revisiting those recommendations and trying now to see what we can do to maybe bolster that, maybe to challenge some of the thinking that we don't agree with or support some of the other types of activities that we could weigh in on and maybe get some change. So I look forward to the Federal Maritime Commission continuing their good work with innovation teams and any other process that they have. I just, am struggling with the speed of government and trying to see how long it will be before we get really some good resolution on this. So that's pretty much a summary of where we're at on fees and surcharges. We'd be happy to open that up to any comments or questions if you have any internally.
Any comments, questions from NSAC members versus online or in person? I've got one real quick. So I think if you think about the ongoing work of this subcommittee beyond what you just talked about, for the people that are not as close to the work, right, in the room and virtually, how can they support the work of the subcommittee? Because I think sometimes we don't talk about that. We talk about the work itself or what we're focused on, but how do we what do you need from the broader shipper community in your ongoing work? Because I think that will be good
So
to hear from you.
It's a good question. Our fees and surcharges committee is at 12 people that are members of this advisory committee. So we're not a quorum, but we've taken as many people that we can to get the opinions of the experts that we have sitting here in the room to put together, weigh the topic. Really look at it from many different angles. So you're looking at it from the importer's angle, the exporter's angle, from the shippers. We also look at it from the carrier's angle and the MTO's angle to try to be very pragmatic about our recommendation and the kind of change that we would like to see. But we don't know all the answers. So we are dependent upon getting the information, from the shipping public as well. So I would encourage everyone as we are re-reviewing, the FMC has an NSAC page on their website. I don't have the actual www here for you, but if you go onto the FMC website and you plug in NSAC, you will get our page. And it has the roster of all our members, so you're welcome to reach out to all of us or any of us. It has also all of the different recommendations that have been made and the responses that the FMC has given. And I find myself referring back to those quite frequently to say, what exactly did we say? What exactly did they say? How can we tweak these? Because it's frustrating not to get to a resolution in having worked for several years on it now. So how do we fix that? So if we could have more input, maybe we get some better idea. There's no silver bullet for any of this, but certainly with everyone's help, we may be able to have the right dialogue and come to the right conclusions.
Thanks, Rich.
Yep.
All right, we'll turn it over to Data and Visibility Subcommittee. One in the room and one virtual, so we're gonna let you guys manage it as you wish.
Go ahead, Gabe.
That was quick. Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good time over there. So on the data subcommittee, just to recap, just as Rich did, we have 5 recommendations that we've put through. The first of which, going back in August to form the NOCAC, the Advisory Committee of Ocean Carriers. See the smile there, Mike, and that is now part of OSRA 23. So hopefully that committee will eventually get stood up and start working. We went ahead with 3 major alignment recommendations, one at container level, one at intermodal level, and one at shipment level. So the clarity and transparency on probably over, I think it was about 50 some odd different data points between those 3 different modes of transport or points of transport, and then an alignment of that data, kind of a technical correction thereafter in May of 2023. As a committee, we thereafter followed through having several different meetings, and it gave somewhat of a major recap at the last quarterly meeting in TPM in Long Beach, and essentially our committee's kind of in a holding pattern now, waiting for several different things to happen, one of which being the MTDI to move forward, of which there was an initial request for information put out by Commissioner Bensel. Once that was responded to, we pitched in a little bit to help out on some clarification and whatnot through different meetings that we had with him. And now there is a new RFI with an additional 25 questions put out to importers, exporters, terminals, and carriers. And those will be due by June 17th. The MTDI is basically the process which we're hoping will move that vehicle forward to have better transparency and better data availability in the ocean transportation system. That will be some time. It would have to first go before the commission approve it, and then move forward on some regulatory matter. So that's still in process. We then took a commercial approach to it. How do we change behaviors within current day-to-day activity? And so we met up with a bunch of different industry participants. Primarily 2 major groups came up, that being DCSA and ASTM, and engaged with them to move forward different standards within the data that's published for ocean carriers. From there, we've kind of reached a little bit of an impasse. We're now kind of in a holding pattern, as I said, waiting for these different entities and groups to move forward their individual agendas and initiatives. And so the committee itself, in a recent meeting, decided we're going to go dormant for a period of time until such information produces out of one of those committee, specifically out of Commissioner Bensel's work, and our committee members will redistribute to the new groups that the new committees that Rich was alluding to, and we'll speak about a little bit further on in the agenda. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank each one of the members of the committee for all your help, support, input, and time spent. There was a lot of time definitely spent on this. We met every other week pretty much for the last 2.5 years. Once a week for about an hour and change, and met with a ton of different stakeholders within the industry to get as much detail as we could. And again, now that information has been provided to the FMC and waiting for action to be taken there. So that's pretty much our update, Mike, for this committee. Alexis, if you want to pitch in anything.
No, you covered it all. Thank you.
Any questions, comments for Gabe or Alexis on the subcommittee work? I want to thank both Gabe and Alexis for your leadership on that. I think there was a lot inside of data. I also want to appreciate both Ellen, who's our designated federal officer for that subcommittee, as well as her predecessor, to really, when you're looking at data, it's so big, to focus in and down, think about outcomes in the proper way. Having the DFO in the room, not to challenge what we're saying, but to kind of challenge the thinking about what we're thinking about, I think was very helpful in our process, right? Is to be not so all encompassing, but also not so minute, but also thinking about it from an importer and exporter perspective. And so appreciate your leadership on this, because, as volunteers, it's the volunteer leaders that, and the support of the other volunteers that focus us in the right directions on these things. I would say just for those who are not going to be here for the next 2 days in the area, at AgTC, somebody from DCSA will be participating in the official program. So we'll get an update on commercial schedules, which is the where they believe from our Q4 public meeting that they can solve for 35 of the 39 data elements that the data subcommittee put forward in the official recommendation to the FMC on the vessel data. And if we think again about what we're dealing with, whether you're an importer or an exporter, and it doesn't matter what part of the country you're in, the fundamental common denominator between all of us is that the cargo is moving on a ship. And what's going on with that ship is important. And yet we all know that the alignment and accuracy of that is not where it needs to be to support what we need. And so again, I'm saying that without judgment. I am saying that without judgment, because there's opportunity here, right? There are other industries in similar dynamics that are not facing the level of complexity that we are as shippers in the United States. And so again, my personal view as an American is we, as the largest economy in the world, can lead on this. There's no reason that we can't, especially coming out of the pandemic. And so it's going to take more engagement for the people attending virtually, as well as the committee working with stakeholders to figure out what's the way forward. But we do appreciate that both ASTM and DCSA took it seriously to engage with us and specifically come back on what they're working on as it relates to the recommendations that have been sent to the agency. So appreciate all the work that's been done in this area as well. And I think to Gabe's point, Commissioner Bensel's moving it forward at the macro level. We need to wait until we see where he needs to be resourced as we go forward. So appreciate that work.
Yeah, Mike, just a quick update on the DCSA. So we knew that from TPM there was a letter sent to the industry CEOs of 9 major steamship lines, and I think 4 or 5 of them responded that it was part of their agenda or part of their initiative within their IT departments to move those data standards put forth by DCSA forward. That included Carrier, CMA, Hapag, Evergreen, and MSC. And CMA has already hit the market with that information. So in one way, shape, or form, it's great to hear that at least, you know, a little bit of the work that we've put forward is starting to make its way onto the commercial platform. So good to hear about that.
Yes. All right. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you.
Fitting over to chassis subcommittee. Steve and Deb. Important for some people in the country and not a non-issue in others, but yet across the entire country and you cannot move a container without wheels. So we'll turn it over to you guys.
All right, thanks, Michael. Apologies for not being in person. Last minute issues at the mothership have required me to squat down and then manage through some changeover. But in overall, we're the youngest of all of the subcommittees. We've met for about a year now with a number of parties related to both port and inland chassis movement and rules and requirements. And in the middle of our chassis committee work, we were paused as a result of a pending case in front of the FMC with OSEMA and chassis providers, which caused us to pause our work so that we don't step on the FMC's ruling related to the chassis. So since then, there has been a finding on the case, and it has been ruled on. And so we've pivoted our focus to reviewing with the inland rail chassis provider support, specifically meeting with the American Association of Railroads. We were fortunate enough to get an appointment with the AAR, I'd say about 6 weeks ago, with the operations team, specifically looking for guidance around how the Class 1 rails will support the most recent finding. And unfortunately, the operations folks have directed us to the commercial folks at the rail. So we are circling back with the American Association of Railroads. They feel that the ruling is a commercial agreement that needs to be answered by the commercial folks, which means that the commercial folks between the rail and the ocean carriers need to have a perspective on how they expect to deal or implement the finding. And so we look to kind of circle back with those folks and have another conversation in order to gain some clarity to see how the ruling will be implemented, and specifically what help that the folks will need in order to provide some ongoing support. And so that's kind of where we are right now. We're kind of on a hold pattern until we can meet with the American Association of Railroad and get some more clarity on how the implementation of the most recent chassis findings will be implemented. And I'll pause there, pass it over to Deb. I think she's in the room if she has anything else to add or build on.
No, and I think you've covered it, Steve. We still have some things to do, but we need a little help here first. So once we speak with them, we'll kind of decide on some next steps.
Very good. Pass it over to you, Mike.
So any questions or comments related to the chassis subcommittee? Dylan, you may not be aware, but I'd like to welcome FMC Commissioner Rebecca Dye has just entered the room.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think just to the point, Steve and Deb, that you've made, I think, you know, you've got the ruling, but I think the key is going to be the conversations with the Western Class 1s, because operationally, I would say for our industry with cotton in Dallas and Memphis, we're not necessarily seeing a change other than the changes with the CCM pool unwinding and what that's going to mean but the underlying things that the ruling looked at and what you guys have been trying to understand with AAR and other stakeholders over the time that you've been up and running remains an open question that we need to figure out, because it's, again, for certain parts of the country, directly impacting importers and exporters every day, right? We may be in a more fluid environment today, but there will be times of acute impact and there'll be consequence. And so we just need to get clarity on what is the process going forward between these commercial parties, which it's between them, but it ultimately affects us as shippers as we go forward. So I think pivoting now, like we said, we're looking forward for the remainder of this year. The decision was made to kind of widen out and add some new work focuses to what NSAC members are going to continue to be engaged on. So we've got 3 areas that will be new. 2 of them will be subcommittees for sure, and 1 will be, as Rich mentioned, will be a working group. So we've got to have port best practices that conveniently is supporting the 3 focuses of Commissioner Dye's work that she's started already. And I'll let Deb speak to that in the room in terms of what the anticipation is in terms of how to support. We'll have refusal to deal, which I'll cover beyond what Rich has already brought up. And then the last one, which has got a lot of traction for specific NSAC members, is shipping exchanges, which is still an open piece of work that's come out of OSRA. There are different, so we've got some members that are interested in figuring out how to participate in that and support the commission as well. So I'll kind of turn it over to Deb real quick, just to kind of talk about, they've had some initial meetings on port best practices subcommittee and kind of where your starting point will be.
And that's very much where we are as a starting point. We've just kind of been touching base, guidelines on where we're gonna go, as you've said, related to Commissioner Dye's 3 proposals. Ultimately, it's reliability on information so that we know where our container is, when we can get it, when to take an empty back to a port, and when you can take a loaded container so it can get onto a vessel. The data just isn't quite there and consistent. I honestly, I'm going to sidetrack a little. I had an experience on my way out here with a delay. And I'm using, of course, different platforms on who's going to tell me first about a delay. And maybe it was just luck or whatever, but using a flight tracker information and also the airline information, within a minute, I knew exactly when the delay was, what gate I had to be at, and I could take action. And in the end, shippers, that's what we're trying to do. What is that platform? Where do we go to have that consistent, reliable information so we know what to do with our container? When we can get there, a lot of our issues are going to be solved. So our group, like I say, we had a basic discussion last week with those that could. We're still missing a lot of input from some of the members of our group. But I look forward to being part of this and seeing how we can move forward with the next steps. We hope to actually speak with Commissioner Dye a little later this afternoon to get some of her wise words, and we'll take off from there. More to come in the next meeting.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Deb, for taking the lead to at least talk about the start of this. I think the second one is we're going to be circling in on as refusal to deal. Talked about it a little bit at the Q1 public meeting when Commissioner Vekich was in the room. It's rulemaking underway right now. The supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking went out in June 14th of last year, based on original industry participation under the original request and then supplementally. And so I think we've got a split like we did within NSAC. We've got 2 importers, 2 exporters kind of looking at it. We are reviewing the actual document, right? So, and really right now, since the rulemaking is underway, what comments came in, like where do they come from? And as the commission has responded to it already in terms of how they're looking at those comments and whether they believe they'll be relevant to the rulemaking or not. That's what the current refusal to deal working group is. That's our starting point. Because I think then once the rule comes out, we need to understand, inside of what's already been presented to the commission, what more work there is to do. I think early on, and you can see it because it is a public document, a lot of the participating organizations and industries were export, because at the time in 21 and 22, and as it rolled into parts of 23, there was concern about the inability to get it empty, right? That the carriers were taking them back at a higher rate for higher paying cargo, and the inability of exporters to get the container were a concern. And so many of the participants that were not, the respondents that were not ocean carriers were exporters. And at the same time, I think as Rich alluded to, the dynamic is changing a little bit, where there are impacts and concerns on importers and third parties that are dealing with this. And so since the rule's underway, there's no more public commentary that can go in at this point, is my understanding. And so we'll try to see around these major issues that were identified by the agency in this document, where are importers and exporters at inside of this? So when the rule does come out, it can be kind of an ongoing dialogue and conversation, see what was addressed and what wasn't addressed. The commission is looking at both commercial and operational considerations in refusal to deal. And I think the interesting part for me individually is that, with all of the things that we heard about at AgTC and other industry associations and in the trade press, there were only 26 organizations or industry associations that provided comments on refusal to deal. So important, but not necessarily a representative cross-section of experience during that time period. So getting back to my comments and points at the beginning of the meeting, engagement and feedback from the broader community, whether you're a small shipper that's doing tens of containers in a year or tens of thousands of containers in a year, it's important to provide feedback to the commission on priority as they go through their work. They take perspective and guidance from you. They go through every public comment that is provided to them inside of documents like this, that it's being considered or thought about with inside their forward work. And so the more informed that they are about what's going on in the system, the more perspective they've got as they go through the work that they're doing. So I think we'll kind of see where this continues to move forward on the working group side. But there's enough inside these 20 pages that it's going to spend some time to go through. We've highlighted the key points we believe. And so it's really figuring out effective ways to connect while we're here at AgTC, but with other shipper organizations and industry verticals to kind of get their take on what their members are experiencing as this goes forward. So when the rule does come in, we're prepared to provide effective feedback to the commission as we go forward. I don't know if Rich, Alexis, or Steve, you guys want to add anything else?
Nothing else.
Got it. So Ken was taking the lead on shipping exchanges, and he unfortunately could not be with us today because his daughter's graduating from graduate school right now as we speak. Is there anybody else who's stepped up for shipping exchanges and wants to provide any feedback on what the focus is going to be? Otherwise, I'll leave it at that we'll have a subcommittee that's going to be looking at shipping exchanges just to talk about and think about some things in terms of behavior and other with them as it relates to shippers in the United States. All right. Pivoted back to you, Dylan, with respect to the listening session and public comments.
All right. So at this point, the committee will open it up to public comment. Before I sort of ask anyone to sort of comment, I'll note that, the public is always welcome to comment to the NSAC via email at nsac@fmc.gov. We at the commission monitor that inbox and forward comments to the NSAC leadership as they arrive. So I'll do this in two parts. I know we have, both in-person and virtual attendees. So I'd like for the in-person, is there anyone in the audience in Tacoma that would like to comment or provide a comment?
And Dylan, before you do that, I think we'll go through the questions that we've got. So again, we've posted this both in the meeting agenda and on the NSAC website. I think what we're trying to understand more from, again, the broader shipping community is, what issue in your supply chain are the most important, troubling, or in need of attention? That's one. What issues do you want to see NSAC address, right? So as a federal advisory committee to the Federal Maritime Commission, are things that we're not working on based on what we've talked about in this meeting and other public meetings and on our website that we could focus on. And then lastly, what issues do you want to see FMC address? We try to talk through things that the commission is working on, the various commissioners that are working on. Does it align with your experience in the system, right? So these are the three areas. They're broad and open. So we'll back to Dylan in terms of, is there anybody in the room here like to make a public comment?
Peter Friedman, Agriculture Transportation Coalition. First of all, great that all of you came here. Excellent that, Alexis, this is the weather that we got here in May. Pretty good, pretty
Did
good.
my best.
Yeah, good job. But I'd also like to introduce for a comment.
Yep.
The person who traveled 8-10 time zones to get here. 20 RINs with the digital container Shippers Association, whatever that thing's called. He's come, he's speaking to the ITC meeting, but he came here and he has something relevant to say based on what was already said here in a few minutes we've been here. So if he could be recognized,
Absolutely.
that would be great.
Thanks, Peter, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I represent the Digital Container Shipping Association. We are funded by the 9 of the top 10 carriers to try and bring in digital standards. And to the point that you just raised about the convenience and ease with which you could engage with the airlines, absolutely agree, and it's where we're trying to get to. It's taken them 30 years to get to that point, and we're on a much earlier stage of that journey. But the key thing that you spoke of was commercial schedules, and that's one of the such important data points that you all need. That has a technical dependency on the vessel schedules. It's taken some years, it's taken at least 2 years so far for us to map that landscape digitally, to get agreements across a large enough scale of the industry to be able to agree what are the minimum foundations to build that platform. And we're there now. And this year, actually, in about the next 8 weeks, 8 of the 9 carriers will implement vessel schedules, a technical API that allows them to exchange that data. And the remaining 1 should be shortly after that. And so by the end of this year, all of them will have that in a production state. They will be trialing it from about 8 weeks from now. They've already started to trial the commercial schedules API that we've built, which again allows them to exchange that data in a more ubiquitous manner. So it's taken us some time to get to this point because it's an enormously complex landscape to navigate. But this year we expect there's going to be a significant difference in the interoperability or the ability to exchange that data. Then it's onto the wider ecosystem, the ports, the terminals, yourselves, to align to that, and you will be able to start getting an improved service of that data. That's useful.
And good news.
Yeah, thank you.
Tony. Anybody else in the room would like to comment on anything that National Shipper Advisory Committee is working on? Dylan, back to you, virtual.
If not, I'll bring it to any of the virtual attendees would like to provide a comment. If so, you can raise your hand and I will recognize you. Yes, Lori Felmer. And you can come on camera for this if you'd like.
Can do that, I think.
All right, thank you. Like, if you could please state your name and affiliation and then go ahead.
Sure, Lori Felmer, and I'm with Bastech International. We're a family-owned chemical distribution company, and we are heavily reliant on import and export by maritime network. I know a lot of you guys here, guys and gals, and I say, like I say every time I see you, thank you for what you're doing. I think this is a monumental task, and it's like a little bit like Sisyphus, but keep at it. I was really thrilled, Rich, to hear you mention the unreasonable refusal to negotiate or deal, because that was why I decided I would attend today and try to bring this subject up. The problems that we had during COVID would really need the attention of this rulemaking. And I think that we've really, the FMC, I think, missed an opportunity to get this published prior to now. I don't think it's beyond expectation that we face the situation that we have right now with ocean carriers failing, really in principle, failing to negotiate or deal. Now, what do I mean by that? I will try to keep it very brief, but we have entered an environment, and this happened several years ago. It happened pre-COVID, but it became exasperated during COVID. We've entered an environment where carriers have really decided that they no longer want to publish tariffs that have the purpose of providing rates and access to commercial carriage, right, to common carriage. We understand that ocean carriers don't have to offer service contracts to everyone, and that's fine. But there needs to be a way for U.S. businesses to engage with ocean carriers to secure space, to negotiate a rate, or to ship against a tariff published rate. What we have seen is the establishment of online dynamic pricing models, which completely deviate from the idea of public rates for public carriage. Service contracts were enabled to be a specialized option where carriers and shippers can take an agreement that say, we're going to talk about commitments to each other and we're going to take it offline and it's going to be confidential between us. That's uniquely designed for the business that we're talking about, that you ship and that we want to carry. That's a good thing. And for everything else, we can work with a tariff. But the ocean carriers have changed that dynamic, and instead of offering public tariff rates that have a minimum validity of 30 days by law, they have instead offered spot rates, dynamic pricing through online opportunities that require immediate booking in many cases, do not necessarily have 30 days validity. It's a, here's your rate, book it now, or the opportunity is gone, right? And I think this has really spiraled into a very unfortunate situation because businesses who, at the discretion of the ocean carrier, become ineligible to file longer term service contracts, right, are relegated to basically bidding on an auction site for space on a ship that they may or may not get. But it's not what I would call common carriage or public access to shipping. And I don't think it's a way that businesses can live long term. I mean, I think we can see it. It was not just a COVID experience because it is happening today. Another portion of this, again, I'll keep it brief, but the role of NVOs in this situation, right? Any shipper who's working with NVOs who don't already have contracts in place for your business, right? But opportunity cargo, right? Those are also being quoted on a spot basis. And because those are managed between the NVOs and the ocean carriers in a service contract, they are again avoiding these 30-day rules that would normally guide any sort of ocean freight rate. And that means that I'm sure lots of people can testify to the fact rates are being offered on less than 30-day validity again, 2-week validity, when meanwhile we all know that there is no space available on a ship within the 2-week period. So I would call that a constructive refusal to deal. I won't go longer. I will share with you all some documentation that you're welcome to look at in case it explains and fills out a little bit more this observation that I have. I'm also hoping and trusting that this is not a new concept to any of you. And I am delighted that the NSAC is going to try to address this. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from online? Mike, I don't see anyone else, so I'll turn it over back to you, okay?
I appreciate it. So I think, we continue to talk since we started within National Shipper Advisory Committee about seeking engagement with the broader shipping community and, trying to, as we've gone through our term into this third year, figure out opportunities to increase engagements. One, to create awareness of what we're working on, but more importantly, to check in to make sure that how we've seen priorities of the subcommittee work aligns with where you are as shippers in the system. And so I think we continue to think about increased engagement on priorities and concerns. And I would say, again, whether you ship a small number of containers over the course of a year or a significant amount of containers, whether you're an importer or exporter, your voice in this process matters. It really does. And case in point, both Lori's comments today, which appreciate in the public meeting, but also BASTech, when I look at, again, the supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking, BASTech was one of the 26 companies that provided specific comments on what they were facing in the system to help guide the Commission on Rulemaking. This is essentially important. If you're facing something in the system, whether there's an existing rule on it or not, what you're facing may not be unique to you, right? And so we want the system to operate effectively, right? We look for industry-based solutions, but there is a reasonableness that the Commission continues to go back to in all of their work that they do. What is reasonable in the system between two parties? It's not to bring, change the fundamental dynamics of the free enterprise system and the open market, but there is a reasonableness to how parties work with each other. And I think you see unreasonableness in things that you're facing, if you feel comfortable to provide feedback. To Rich's point, there's many different ways to connect in. You can go straight to the NSAC website. You can go to a member of one of the subcommittees, and we're all listed, right? You may know us from industry affiliations and organizations. And so we are open to receiving this stuff and maintaining a level of confidentiality about it if there's a concern, right? About bringing it up in a public vein like we're doing in a public meeting today. I think as we continue to look at the forward as well, we want to also continue to focus on opportunities to engage with industry, suppliers, other stakeholders. Again, Michael Darden from ASTM is on. Tony is here from DCSA. Other people from DCSA have participated, but it's also been earlier on in the process that Gabe talked about, Port Optimizer, right, with the Port of LA. It's been truckers in the West Coast and other parts of the country talking about the chassis experience. It's been other parties engaging with fees and surcharges. So we're clear on the landscape. And I think to the point that Rich made before, we're not looking solely from the frame of reference of shippers. We understand we exist in a system, and improvements in behavior, improvements in practice are a multifaceted approach because it's zero sum doesn't get us anywhere. And so it's really trying to look at it more holistically to figure out what are the right ways forward on some of these issues. And so again, all the work that we're doing is in support of the Commission. And so at the end of the day, the better informed we are from the shipper community, those who are in the room today and those who are online and those who are not with us but may decide to look at this recording at some point in the future after today, we do want to hear you. It is a sincere request. It has been since we started. It's as we saw that people were not aware of what we were working on, we've made it more intentional to be physically in places where other shippers are in greater concentration to try to create those opportunities. And so I'll kind of close it at that. That you as individual shippers in the system have a voice. We need to figure out where do we have common interest and convergence on specific priorities. Those need to be the things that we're working on with the most time and effort as volunteers, because everyone who's in this room who's participating in NSAC, this is in addition to what they're responsible for in their own organizations or industry associations on a day-to-day basis. And so I'll close with my appreciation for the colleagues and the work we've done together so far, knowing we've still got the second half of the year to continue to focus on and support the mission and the charter of the committee. I'll turn it over to Rich if he's got anything else you want to add.
I would just like to echo your comments about participation. And if you recall in our Long Beach meeting, we did actually solicit some questions and we're in the current D&D final billing. It'll become law here in a little more than a week. And so NCBFAA had initially started a campaign to gather questions. And that was extended through NSAC to the public. We got some public questions back. Knit League, also NRF participated with some questions. So NCBFAA has submitted those now to the FMC. I think it would be a great idea if the FMC would consider putting together an FAQ with the responses to those questions, because they're on a lot of people's minds on how to best navigate this somewhat complicated and a little bit convoluted D&D final billing rule. And again, it's on top of us now. And OMB has come out and approved the wording of the data elements. So there's new data elements that will be incorporated above and beyond OSTRA. They've created a little bit of confusion in how to add, not all of them, some of them are very simple, but there may be another complexity to one or two of those added data elements that need some clarity. So I think it'd be a great time where we get traction from the FMC to help us answer for the public some of those questions that are burning on their minds as they go to implement and be compliant with this new D&D rule. So, but again, echoing Mike's comments, thank you everybody for your participation and very much appreciate working with everyone. That's it for me.
Well, if that's it from Mike, then that concludes today's meeting. Thank you everyone for tuning in and participating. I know the committee is appreciative of it. And so I will adjourn the meeting. And John, you can go ahead and stop the recording. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.